Hello and welcome to another episode of Boundless Body Radio. I'm your host, Casey Ruff, and today we have another amazing guest to introduce to you now. Dave Scott is a rugby player, coach, mentor, strength and fitness geek, mechanic, gardener, learner, and sometimes teacher. He has been a small business owner for over 20 years. He has been married for over 3 decades and has 5 adult sons. Dave uses his free time and resources to help others along the way with their journey. His personal focus is especially on helping men, young and old, aim towards personal, relational, and spiritual health. He has a tremendous and very useful blog at davescotts.blog. You can also find him on Twitter at that same handle, at davidscottsblog. Dave, what an honor to welcome you to Boundless Body Radio.
Casey, thank you so much. I appreciate that intro, and I'm honored to be on your podcast. You have some great guests, and I've been following your podcast myself, and it's kind of surreal to be included in that list now. So thank you very much.
Well, absolutely. And I believe deservedly so. You have this really cool blog that I really love, and you just do it like for kindness. You just do it to share your message. And I think that story is so cool. And I really, really love and appreciate that about you and the message you're trying to share. And so, yeah, I'm really looking forward to having an awesome conversation. We have been very lucky. We've gotten some really good guests, and you're one of them. So thanks for coming on.
Great. Thank you very much.
Man, so you are a rugby player, even in your mid-50s. That's amazing. Is that your primary sport?
Yeah, it is. You know, it's funny. I was always a really small guy in high school. I tried to play football in middle school and got killed because I was so small. And so I never really did any kind of sports through junior high, high school, or college. But my kids actually in middle school started playing rugby. And I had no idea what this sport was all about. It looked terribly dangerous. But the more they played, the more exciting it was. And, you know, it was one of those things where we have touch rugby as well as contact rugby. And Memphis is a big rugby town. And so I would go out there with my kids and watch them play. And then one day I was like, you know, I think I can do this. And I was in somewhat decent shape at my age, which was I think I was about 44, 45 years old at that time.
That's amazing.
And I was just going to run with them. Now, listen, the first day I stepped on the field, you know, it's brutally hot in Memphis anyway. I thought I was going to have a heart attack. I was not in shape the way that I thought I was. But I really enjoyed it. And somebody goes, hey, you know, we've got a kind of a masters league. Why don't you join up with the local team? You can learn how to play and then play masters. And I did that. And I'm playing with guys, you know, they're like half my age. And, you know, one day, one of the guys on the team said, how come you never play with us when we go to games? I was like, well, because, you know, I'm supposed to be in the old boys league. I'm not supposed to be playing with you guys. And they were like, come on, play with us. And so I did. I started playing with the local team here in Memphis and loved it. Absolutely loved it. But, you know, here I am almost 10 years later. And, you know, I've definitely had to learn some things about keeping up with the young guys and how I have to train a little bit different at my age to stay competitive. But, you know, I still love playing. And my goal when I train is that at a drop of a hat, I can step onto a rugby field and play no matter where I am, because it's that kind of sport. You can do that anywhere you go in the world. You can step onto a field with a bunch of guys and have that camaraderie and play that sport.
Wow. I definitely do notice the camaraderie. It's pretty easy to tell how close everybody gets, even on different teams. Like the thing where I think it's the All Blacks, don't they buy the other team beer after the game and they all just like hang out together? It seems like that kind of a physical sport does provide that kind of camaraderie of you know, like shared suffering, I guess.
It really is. You know, we have there are kind of unspoken rules, but you know, if I'm on the road and I'm traveling somewhere with a team, when you get to the other pitch, you know, the other team's pitch, and you play a match, man, you play hard when you're on the field, and you know, it's brutal. However, when the last whistle is blown, everybody shakes hands. You go to the local pub, you buy each other a beer, and you know, you spend time getting to know your opponent, and it's just a really different atmosphere than I would say traditional traditional sports, it's much less segregated and much more of a brotherhood. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. It's a real brotherhood of guys.
Wow. Is it as violent as I would imagine?
Well, it can be pretty violent. It's funny. So I've got 5 boys. You said in your intro, all 4 of those boys played rugby in either high school or middle school.
Wow.
And we've had days where we go to a tournament, and there was one tournament we went to where my youngest son broke his arm in the first match of the day, and the older one broke his arm in the last match of the day. So, it's like we spent a lot of time in ERs, and actually we spent less time in ERs once we got used to the game. Somebody's probably going to call protective services on us, but you get to the point where you go, you know what? I know that's broke, but there's nothing that they're going to do about it on a Saturday afternoon. So we're going to splint you up and take you to the ortho on Monday. And you just kind of, you kind of get used to it after a while, but it can be pretty brutal. But what's funny, Casey, is, people look at football with the pads and the helmets and all that stuff, and they have this impression about, rugby, that it's just football without pads. But what you learn to do is you learn to be really smart about the way you handle your body. Your pads and helmets allow you to get away with a lot of carelessness. And that's where a lot of concussions come in, and a lot of injuries that we're just now learning about today. And sure, that's in rugby as well. But I have learned that you really learn to be smart with the way you move and handle your body when you're putting it under stress, the way you do in a match.
Wow. Yeah, that's a really good point. I was actually going to ask you about that mental health aspect of the game. Is that something that's being talked about in rugby, or is it just is not as big of an issue because of that? Because you're not running, literally head to head as fast as 2 giant people can fly at each other the way you would in football, since you do have the helmet. Is it as much of an issue there?
Yeah, I would say without numbers, like I can't tell you one versus the other, which is worse. But I can tell that, whereas I get the impression you're going to lose the NFL as a sponsor here. Whereas, the NFL, there was a conspiracy of silence for a while about the head injury problem there. I would say that rugby is more out in front of that. And we don't have rules in rugby. We have laws in rugby. And so, whatever. But those laws are changing constantly to try to protect the health, especially the mental health, and lower the risk of those head injuries that we've seen happen over the years. And even, within rugby, there's been some big high profile cases within the last year or two where, professional players, World Cup players have come out and said, I don't even remember playing the game.
Wow.
And so, we're all having to look at that and find out what the best way is to handle that. And I can tell you, as a high school and middle school coach for years, really having to be careful about these young kids and taking care of them so that, rugby's just a game at the end of the day, and they've got the rest of their life ahead of them. And you really have to protect them and, their parents. Most parents don't really want their kids playing rugby. You can imagine. And so you have to, put those parents at ease and let them know that you really do have the best interests of their kids at heart. And you're doing your very best to protect them at the end of the day. Now, what the kids decide to do, I had a kid one time that he was concussed, plain and simple, but it was not obvious to me. He never said a word. Nobody ever said anything. And after the match, his mom called and said, "Hey, how come my kid got a concussion and you didn't tell me?" And, he had covered it up and just had not told me. So,
Wow.
There's that machoism that comes with being a rugby player or a football player, an athlete. And you have to get over that for your own well-being. You have to get over that and take care of yourself.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think with football, we learned that it's those kind of repeated sub-concussion level hits that accumulate over time. And I always wonder about, maybe the kid who is only going to ever play at that high school level, they're not going to be pro. They're not going to do this for the rest of their life. That's one thing. But to sustain damage that, again, like you said, notice that damage later in life would be pretty tough.
Yeah, really tragic.
Yeah, for sure. I have to ask you before we move on, what was it like to have the game basically taken away from you for a few years and play your first game after the pandemic?
My first official match was actually this past Saturday. We have a really big tournament in Memphis. It's an Olympic Sevens style rugby tournament in Memphis. And it was heartbreaking having that taken away as a player. But I can also tell you as a coach, having that, well, I'll back up even. My kids started playing in middle school, as I said, but I've had 3 of them and actually have played in college for the University of Memphis Tigers. And one of them graduated this past spring. And, his last 2 seasons were in the middle of a pandemic. And here's a kid who started when he was in 5th grade and, at this point is at the pinnacle of his playing ability and skill. And he was actually the captain of the team this year. And season, and it's heartbreaking. It was heartbreaking for the whole community. And, what's been great, there is a Major League Rugby league now in the United States. It's fairly young. It's about 3 or 4 years old. And they just finished their finals last week. And one of the things that was great for the rugby community is that they were able to finish their entire season. There were no games canceled for COVID or any kind of violation of restriction. Even there's a Toronto team. They played the entire season living in the United States, away from Canada, just so they could participate within the guidelines, the COVID guidelines set out by the league. So, that was great to be able to have that to watch and to look forward to. But as a player and as a coach, I can tell you, it's been really tough. And so, we're really looking at this next year as being a rebuilding year for a lot of high school and college teams, especially. And, we had some great momentum in the growth of the sport. And it's going to be really hard to pick that momentum back up, I can tell you. For me as a player, I play whenever I can. And just being able to step on a field and run with the ball in your hands, it's the best feeling in the world. And, you're kind of apprehensive going, okay, what? I don't know what kind of shape I'm in. I haven't hit anybody in 2 years. Who knows what this is going to feel like, but it was a great day for Memphis rugby. I can tell you that. And it was a great day for me as well.
That's amazing. What a cool sport. It's so cool to learn about from somebody who plays it. And I don't know why you didn't get the memo. You just don't understand. As we age, we decline. We get older and fatter and sicker. We add more chronic disease. You don't find new physical sports at age 45. Did you not get that memo? Like, everybody knows this.
I just must not have been in circulation on that one for some reason. Yeah, I can tell you, my mother, she's one of the biggest rugby fans now that my kids have been playing for so long. But the look in her eyes when I told her, hey, yeah, by the way, I joined a team. She's in her 70s. And I come from good stock, say that, at least on her side. She was running half marathons up until she was almost 70, I guess. But she still looked at me like I was crazy, like she could not believe. And, I still get a lot of that when I went out Saturday, I wasn't on a team. I just brought my boots with me and my shorts and a mouthpiece. I thought, well, if somebody turns up short, I'm going into the field. And as soon as I walked out there, and everybody, you get used to people making fun of you after a while, but, they still ask. They still want you out there on the field, even if you're 54. If you can run and you can tackle and you can do the job. Now, like I said, I've had to learn to train differently than the young guys. That's for sure. When I first started, I tried just to muscle it out and run with guys that were in their 20s. And I learned pretty quick that my body just couldn't do that. I could still compete and compete well, I think. However, I couldn't beat my body up in the same way they could. I just couldn't recover the same way. And so I had to learn kind of on my own what it took to be in my peak performance to do the job I needed to do. And you look at some of the older rugby players out there, and you listen to, and I'm talking about high level competitive rugby players. You're capping out in your probably mid 30s, but even then, they're realizing that they've got to change the way they do things, or else they just won't be able to keep up.
That's so interesting. It's really apparent that you have gone through an evolution of understanding health and fitness from your blog. You are very upfront and open with the methods that you use, and you see how those things change and evolve over time. This is a huge question. We could talk for 18 hours on the answer, but what are some of the most important things that you've, implemented along the way that has helped you with your understanding of health and fitness?
Well, like I said, I kind of look at myself from a performance standpoint, performance, and it doesn't have to be performance versus longevity. It can be both of those at the same time. And when it comes to performance, I'm trying to stay explosive. I'm trying to keep my aerobic fitness good for recovery on the field, that kind of stuff. I'm also, I'm strength training quite a bit. And of course, my diet has really changed. But what I've learned is, when I was a kid, now I wasn't I wasn't an athlete in high school or college, but I was a lifter. I loved to be in the gym. I loved to lift weights. And when I was in college, I would easily do 2-a-day workouts. I've always been a little guy, but I was big and strong for my size. And what I learned, when I joined a rugby team and decided I thought I was supposed to train like that as a strength athlete. And you can't be in the gym 5 days a week. You can't be on the field 3 days a week. You can't neglect sleep. You can't eat garbage. I'll tell you, Casey, one of the things that this is like simple when it comes to diet, but when I first really got rolling on rugby, I knew, number one, I needed to put on weight. I went in weighing about 160, 165. And that was a joke as a player. We pride ourselves in rugby for recruiting the fat guys because you can really use the big boys on the field. And I needed to put on some weight. So I was eating pretty much anything in sight. I was just gulping whatever kind of protein shakes I could get and just trying to get calories in my body. Because the paradigm I come from is the old style bodybuilding community of the 80s, and that's what we did then. And I would have to pop a couple of ibuprofen before I ever stepped on the field because my joints hurt so bad. I was so creaky. I was so just all the time I was fighting injury. And coming to a point where a couple of years later, I think forcing my nutrition to be so, it's funny. You think of it as being healthy for performance, but it's actually terrible for your body. I finally got to a point where my stomach was a disaster, really. It was, I guess you would call it IBS for lack of a better term. It was just always a mess. And I took a couple of days. I went on a long fast. And I came back and I completely overhauled my diet, dropping processed sugar, pretty much all processed foods. Grain is gone. It's been gone, which is tough. If you're a rugby player, you want to drink a lot of beer, but I had to put that out of my diet. The pasta's gone, all that kind of stuff. And I went pretty much, I would say pretty close to a ketogenic or at least low carb paleo diet at that point. And it completely changed the way my body felt and performed. I think it's on my blog somewhere. I accidentally lost over 25 pounds in a matter of months.
Yeah, that's right.
I didn't know I had that weight to lose. Everybody talked about how small I was. I was down about 148 pounds at that point. Like I didn't know I was carrying that much weight.
Wow.
And I have since kind of stabilized at about 155 pounds. And I feel like that's probably my equilibrium weight at that point. That was my high school weight. I feel good at this weight. I feel light. I feel able to perform. So, again, some of the things that I've had to change would be my diet. I've had to change how many days I train. I can't recover if I'm in the gym 4 days a week. I just can't do it. 3 days, I'm fine. I can't, I sprint 1 day a week, and that's all I need to sprint. If I'm, practicing, I get my sprint days on practice days. My sleep, I really take care of my sleep. That's something that's very important to me. And that was tough, as I'm an IT guy. You mentioned that I've got my own business, and I've been in IT for 30 years, and I've got my own business. It used to be that I'd stay up at all hours of the night and work because I could. And now I just can't do that. I have a pretty rigid sleep schedule that I try to keep to, so that I can recover and so that I'm doing my best. And that's a couple of the big rocks, as I call them: your sleep, diet, and recovery. For me, at my age, those are the things that work for me.
Mm. Yeah, that's great. That sounds like a very balanced approach between, doing and pushing and striving versus surrendering and allowing yourself to rest and recover. I think that's so important. I on that blog post that you made about accidentally losing all that weight, it's pretty amazing. And it's part of the reason why I recommend people do before and after pictures, because those pictures, you can tell a huge, huge difference. And part of that journey was, you tried a fairly more strict kind of carnivore diet at pretty much about the same time that I did. In 2019, I wanted to try it for like 30 days and liked it so much, I just kind of forgot to go off of it. What was your experience with the carnivore diet itself?
I loved it. And, my carnivore experience is very much, all types of meat. So fish, beef, chicken, you name it, pork. I'm in Memphis, Tennessee, so you got to eat a lot of pork down here. I know you just had what's the barbecue gal you just had on the podcast?
Yeah.
It was so good.
Susie.
She called out Memphis, and it's like, but I still hold to primarily a meat-based diet. When I get up in the morning, it's basically a piece of meat and a couple of eggs. That's what I have in the morning. My lunch is centered around some kind of piece of meat, and I might throw in an avocado, a couple of slices of cheese, something like that. The hard part about that, at my house, if you only knew, Casey, what a cook my wife is, she is amazing. When you've got as many kids as we do, and then you've got all of their friends and girlfriends and now wives and now their children, we feed a lot of people around here.
Wow.
And so trying to learn how to cook in such a way where you can accommodate the most number of people and still make it a somewhat healthy meal is pretty tough. She does a great job. My wife, I got to say, she's come along this journey as well. And she has really transformed her health alongside me, but independently of me. Her body works a very different way than mine does. And she's done a great job there as well. But back to the carnivore-ish, I would say that our dinner times, because they involve so many people, it's much more diverse. So we're having a much broader range of vegetables and starches and things like that. And so, I have to kind of pick through that and eat what works for me. But she's very sensitive to the way that I prefer to eat. And so there's she'll set aside the meat. She'll set aside the shrimp. She'll set aside the fish, whatever it is, she'll set some aside for me and let me do whatever I want to with it. And, I still really center my diet around a carnivore-ish diet.
Nice.
That's what I call it right now.
Yeah. Wow. No, that's great. That's awesome. Another thing I've heard you talk about on your blog is related to somebody that we've also interviewed on our show, Dr. Phil Maffetone, and using heart rate training and the Mafitone method to calculate your heart rate. Can you tell us a little bit about that and some of the benefits you've noticed?
It's funny because I unfortunately I don't have a great heart rate monitor. I just use my Fitbit, and I use usually Strava along with that. But it is so obvious when you really tie yourself to that Maffetone method, which is essentially, for people who don't know, they need to go back and listen to the episode. But you take 180 beats per minute, which is different than the traditional, 220 minus whatever, I can't remember. But
that's right.
For Maffetone, it's 180 minus your age. And that's kind of a good target aerobic heart rate. And it's weird because you think, I am not working hard at all. You're almost walking when you get started. But you're watching that. For me, I'm watching my Fitbit, I'm watching my heart rate, and I'm trying to keep it pegged out at around, for me, it's around 25 to 130 beats per minute. And I've noticed that, true to what Phil says, the longer you do that, you become so much more efficient in your aerobic health, to where you're going farther, faster, with the same target heart rate. So you're becoming more efficient. And for an athlete, that just means that you're going to be that much better at recovering in your strength training, in your on-field, in your if you're a marathon runner. I'm definitely not a long distance runner, but you become so much more efficient, and it's so easy to track when you're doing that Phil Maffetone method.
That is very well explained. And I definitely second you for the listener. It's such a great way to train and build, like you said, your efficiency, your fat burning capacity. You just see your performance just slowly increase at the same rate, like you were saying. It's such a great way to train and a great way to avoid burnout.
Casey?
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, it's funny. So going back to what we were talking about earlier, it's been almost 2 years since we were able to play on the field. And it's been if you read my blog, I do a lot of N=1 experiments. I'm always changing up my routines. I'm changing my diet. I'm changing what supplements I take, if any. I change my strength training routines. But this has been kind of a lab for me, doing Phil's method, doing some high intensity work as well, which I've just integrated in the last year, really, since I couldn't get on the field and do anything, my strength training. And so it's been kind of a lab to see, okay, was I successful with that, stepping back onto the field this summer? And I was so incredibly surprised to see just how well I could perform. You get tired anytime you're doing something as high octane as playing, sevens or touch rugby or whatever. But, I'm not gassed. I feel good. I can run with kids. I run with my own kids. Like, I play against my own boys when I'm on the field. So it's like, it's really cool. And, I'm not going to be as fast as those guys are, but I can keep up and I can hold my own. And so I know, like with the Maffetone training and the HIIT work that I'm doing, I know that it's worked. I know for sure that those experiments have come through for me. So it's really been helpful.
That is also very well explained, and such a cool thing to know about yourself, that you were able to maintain your fitness for years of not playing sport. It's so cool. I love that. Mm-hmm. I really want to talk to you about your business. This last year in starting our own business and learning about how to be an entrepreneur and how to do things the right way, I'm curious to know, why was it important for you to start your own business, and what were some of your guiding principles to help you along the way?
Well, first of all, Casey, congratulations to you. I've been kind of following this through your podcast, how you've been doing. And, it was such a huge shift for so many people to suddenly have the rug pulled out from under them with the COVID pandemic. And for me, I've been doing this for a long time, and I didn't have to alter very many of my processes already. But I'll be honest with you, and it's not a great guiding principle for starting a business. I don't work well under other people's direction. I think it's funny. When I started my company, I started with my then boss over 25 years ago. We were both IT geeks, and the internet was really coming of age. And we found that we had kind of an edge over most of the people in the market, at least where we were locally. And so we said, you know what? We can do this, and we should do this. And we just loved working together. It was fun for us, and we geeked out over it. So we got started. And now it was pretty tough. I'm going to throw this anecdote in there. We made the decision that we were going to quit our job, but I was in the middle of buying a house. And you know how it is, with the finance companies, you have to have all your ducks in a row when it comes to having your finances in order. And so my wife and I, we signed the contract on our house, and I was just waiting for that. And the day we signed the contract, I got dressed, I went into work, I turned in my resignation, and 2 weeks later, I was on my own. So it's been a wild ride and an adventure ever since. My wife has been very gracious, as through the growing pains of having our own business.
Wow.
But the things that I've learned, some of the customers that I have today are the same customers I had when I started my business, and integrity and customer service and really being attentive to the people that you're serving will go so far in any business. And I'm surprised sometimes at how people miss that. And even in whatever, in the internet business age that we're in, you can still be a person of really attentive customer service and a person of real integrity. And, even when you screw up, I've talked about this before on my blog and elsewhere, but when you screw up, you have to admit that you screwed up. You have to be straightforward with people, your kids, your wife, the people that you work for. And if you are a person who has really taken the time to serve your customers well, then you know what, you can get past a lot, especially with your growing pains as you start a new business. People are really good at heart, I think, and really want to work with you. And you know what? If they aren't, I believe in a culture of generosity and of plenty. And if those people are not going to walk alongside you through those times, then it's okay to turn those people loose as well. And to work with people that also have integrity and an attitude of generosity.
Yeah, I agree with you so much. I think that people are drawn to those qualities, and that pays out much, much better over the course of the long term versus, maybe being a little bit more cutthroat in the short term to get a sale or whatever. It's just so different. When I was with, the major corporation that we trained with for so long, we always knew like the number that we needed to hit to sell to, service, to the number of supplements that we had to sell every single month. And then, the answer was always just more. Like it's never enough. It's just more. And I found it to be a bit of a challenge and something I'm constantly working on. And so I'm going to ask you, like, how do you manage time versus money? When do you push and sacrifice your time so you can make more money? But when do you choose to do the opposite and say, like, look, the money's enough. Now I have time. I'm going to use that resource for something different.
Wow, that is a great question, Casey. I'm not kidding. And, part of my deal first of all, something that is, I keep in mind a lot is the concept of seasons in your life, right? You harvest in the fall. You rest in the winter, you plant in the spring, you play in the summer. And your whole life is like that. And when I first got started in my business, when we moved in this house I talked about a while ago, he was 2 weeks old. That was my number 2 son.
Wow.
Like I said, I've got 5. And so I'm starting a business. I'm buying a house. My wife is a stay-at-home mom at that point. She had been a professional, an accountant, and she decided she wanted to be home with the kids. And, man, I was working my tail to the bone, trying to provide for my family at that point. And that was the season that I was in. And I realized quickly, especially as we had more kids, that I actually couldn't be in that season. I was in a different season than I thought. I thought I was in the startup phase where I could, work all night and be gone from the house. What my wife needed was for me to be at the house and to be helping her with a bunch of small kids. And so for a time, I had to back off the money and I had to do what I needed to do to cover what needed to be covered. But I also needed to take care of my wife and my kids and invest my time there. And as my kids got older then, of course, and became more independent, well, now I could turn my attention to investing my time in my business and structuring things to where, When the kids are awake, I'm with the kids. When the kids are asleep, those are the times that I work, or early in the morning before everybody gets up. That's my time to do the things that I really need to do. And then as I've gotten older, I'll tell you, I've had a really major shift in because of the season that I'm in now. My kids are all grown. They're all adults. Now, I still have a couple that live at home with me, but they're getting married. They're having their own kids. I'm in a new season. And so I'm able to do even more with my business now and invest even more time and take it in different directions. But I can also invest my personal time in places that I couldn't before as well. So, I believe a lot in being available for people. And so, again, early mornings are great times for me to get up and I meditate and I spend time with my wife and we have coffee together and we prepare our days together. And then I launch out and I do the things that I need to do for business. But, I've got on my calendar every day is my workout. And, when a customer calls and says, hey, I want to meet at, so-and-so a time, if it interferes, sorry about that, with my calendar date for my workout, well, then I've already got an appointment booked then. And I can't meet with the client. I have to say no to that. And I have to take care of myself. If I have an appointment with my kids at a certain time, because I try to meet with them as often as I can during the week, or if I have a mentoring appointment with somebody and that's on my calendar, then I have to go, you know what? I have to trust that the business is going to be there and I can make that happen. I've made a commitment and I'm going to carry through with that commitment. But, I'm pretty rigid about my calendar. I do my best and I try to keep those things out front of me that are important to me so that I can get all the things in that need to be gotten. But then, when the day's over, the day's over. And I can't do any more for the day. Let me say one thing, Casey. The just stream of consciousness came into my head. In the business that a lot of us are finding ourselves in, especially with the internet age, the job is actually never done. I don't know if you've noticed that. You could check email all night. You could be making appointments all day long. If you're working around schedules the way a lot of us are having to, especially in the pandemic with Zoom meetings and emails and all that kind of stuff, you could never be done with your job. And I see people who they just keep going and keep going and keep going, and they're neglecting themselves. They're neglecting their relationships. When you have to say, you know what, today it's time for me to put a pin in this. There's always going to be work tomorrow. And you have to have the discipline to step away from that sometimes and not kill yourself. Now, I mean, you and Bethany, you got a new job, a new business. Y'all haven't been married, 4 or 5 years? Is that right?
Yeah, 4 years.
And y'all don't have any kids yet?
Not yet, working on it.
See, y'all can burn the candle at both ends. You got this. As long as y'all make the agreement between each other, but you have to look at, whenever the seasons change, you have to look at that and you have to decide, how is my life going to change in this season? And you got to make those adjustments.
That is so well explained. What a fantastic and very thoughtful answer around that. It is a challenge because you're right. You can work as much as you like, but you need to put some type of stopgap in there. One thing that I love about you and your story is you freed up time that you then used in a passion project. And you have your blog, which is fantastic. You're sharing something that's not related to your professional career at all. I can't buy anything on your website. You have nothing to sell. You're just helping other people, which I think is so cool. So I wanted to ask you why it was important for you to create content. And secondly, like we said in the intro, your personal focus is especially on helping men, young and old, to aim towards personal, relational, and spiritual health. And I want to know why that became the most important thing for you.
There are a couple of reasons. First of all, I don't have a program. I don't have a course. I don't have anything. What I do have is time, and I have even bad experience. I have experience, right? People can learn from at least my mistakes, if nothing else. And I don't mind sharing that because, as a husband and a father, my wife and I, we dated for 4 years. We were high school sweethearts, and we thought we had everything down. And we got married after dating for 4 years. And oh my gosh, marriage was so hard. Getting used to people, a person being up in your business all the time, your expectations and the differences that you never realized were there was really hard. And we bumped up against each other for a while. And it's like, if I can help somebody avoid some of that pain, man, I want to do that. When you're a new parent, we have this thing, Casey. It's like, because we were kids, we think we can raise them like without any preparation whatsoever. Guys are like this. Women, they'll read What to Expect When You're Expecting and What to Expect the First Year. Like, they're much more thoughtful about it than us guys are. But we just kind of we until we need to know it, we don't go looking for the answers. And then as a father of 5 guys, I have had the pleasure of meeting so many young men through just their friendships and through coaching opportunities. A lot of these guys, unfortunately, don't have male role models in their lives. They're coming from, single parent, especially single mother homes, and they don't have good relationships with their dads. And what they desire, they want to have a solid business. They want to have a way to support their families. They want to have families. They want to they don't like the way they grew up with or without their fathers. And so, man, if I can somehow come alongside some of those guys and point them in a direction, James Clear, Atomic Habits, a 1% change every day. Like, if I can just aim them in a direction that will be a more solid direction than the way that they're going today, and change their trajectory, help them, be their guide there, then, hey, I've done something. I've made the world, and I've made that guy's life better. And that's kind of where my passion is. Now that I've raised my own kids, I'm fortunate enough that they still want to be with me and my wife. They still hang out with us. They still pretend to listen when we try to offer them any kind of advice. But, now that I've done my time with my boys, I want to find the next generation, and I want to help those guys come along as well, so that they can have the most satisfying life that they can have.
Well, I mean, if nothing else, you can always just take your kids to the rugby field so you can smack them around there.
It's like if you can just land one good hit on them, it feels so good. Oh, it feels
great.
So good.
Oh, that's great.
And they feel the same way about me too. I can tell you that.
That's awesome. I don't think I've ever beat my dad in basketball. I just think there's that generational thing. You'll never quite be able to beat your dad at like the primary sport. So on that note, that was another just really great, thoughtful answer. What would you want somebody like me to know? A future father. I don't have kiddos yet. I'm 37 years old, so need to start working on that. Tell me what advice you'd have for somebody like me.
Yeah, number one is start, because it gets harder the older you get. I'm a grandfather now, and man, when the grandkids come over, I love them, but nothing will tire you out like a grandkid will.
That's funny.
I have to go back, Casey, I'm sorry, but to the idea of seasons in your life, and really savoring those seasons and enjoying them while you have them, and paying attention to the need of that time. Make hay while the sun shines. It's an old agricultural, saying, but it's like you only have a certain opportunity to have time and influence with your kids. And, once a kid hits a certain age, this is, one of the things you learn, especially with teenagers, we were all teenagers, and that you get to a certain point where your kids have absolutely no respect for you when they become teenagers. You lose your influence with them. And so, if you think, okay, I've got maybe 12 years where they're really going to think I'm the coolest thing in the world, right? And part of that, they're drooling and in diapers, so they really don't have. I don't have an influence with them then. You have a really small amount of time to build a relationship with your kids, so that when they finally do come back to the point where they say, okay, you know what, Dad, actually, there's a lot more to him than I realized. that you guys can have a relationship with each other, and I would say too, with your, this was my experience with my wife. So we got married when we were 22, 23 years old, I believe. Actually, our anniversary is this week. It's on
nice.
Thursday.
Congratulations.
We married 32 years.
So cool.
We were kids, when we got married, and we had almost 6 years together to learn how to be a couple together, which is so important because guess what? When, ultimately, when your kids grow up and move away and leave you, you're going to be left with your wife. And do you have a relationship there with her that you guys can pick up where you left off when the kids started coming along? And can you enjoy life for the next 25, 30, 50 years down the line, right? You have to build those relationships early. It's all about relationships with your wife and your kids, and even with your friends. I can't tell you, Casey, how blessed that I've been. My wife and I were very intentional about building friendships with men and women that we wanted our kids to respect and that they would listen to, so that when you become uncool when your kids are 12 years old, that there are still adults in your kids' lives that they will listen to and respect when they won't listen and respect you. And that has been so valuable. So the community you surround yourself with, the relationship you build with your wife, and ultimately the relationship you build with your kids. You want your kids to want to hang around with you when they don't have to anymore. And aiming toward that destination. If you begin with the end in mind, as Covey would say, if you begin with the end in mind, then that guides the way that you direct your parenting, your marriage, your business, all of the big places in your life.
Wow, that's awesome. I especially love how you explain the seasons. It kind of reminds me of a Bible verse. I know, spirituality and the Christian faith is something that's really important to you and your family.
Mm-hmm.
And
Absolutely.
I'm thinking about what you just said, and another part of the Bible that says, you need to let your light shine. You need to show what you're doing by example so people can follow. And I wonder, is that in a world where we have this total lack of really great role models, the media is catching our attention. We don't see the people that are doing the most good, maybe in the background. Is living your life the right way? Does that end up being one of the most selfless things that you can do by showing an example to others?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you definitely nailed it there. My Christian faith is our Christian faith in our family is, it's a real, it is who we are. And, the way I explain it to folks is, I actually think I put this on a post recently, but, we look at our lives as being like a pie. And we divide it up into all these different pieces. I've got my work life, I've got my marriage, I've got my family, I've got my training time, I've got my hobbies, and I have spirituality in there along with that, however you practice that spirituality. And that's just another slice of the pie. In America, a lot of times it's what you do on Sunday, right? And instead, spirituality, and I would say this is how I describe it in our house, is we try to make it the pie filling, right? The cherry pie filling isn't just in one slice. It's the thing that is all through all of the different slices of the pie. And so, loving people is ultimately what it's all about. Loving people, serving people in the way that God loves and serves people, his creation. That's where we try to be centered. Now, we're screw ups like everybody else is. And, I totally miss out on what to be. But, any way that I can use what I've learned from, who God is to influence people to live a life of love, then, man, I feel like I've done what I needed to do.
Well, Well, yeah, that's also very well explained. I think for the sake of naming things and grouping things together, we kind of have like, the physicals over here, the spirituals over here, the nutrition is this part, your recovery is this part, your mentality. They're all like different buckets, but I really have noticed the further down this path that you go towards any improvement on any one of those things, I notice improvements with everything. It's almost like it's a synergy that, like, since I improved my sleep, now my physical's better. Now I'm waking up earlier. I'm more grateful. So now my spirituality is increasing. Is that something you've noticed too? That, yeah, there's kind of a difference in some of these things, but once you start improving one, like, doesn't the whole thing kind of improve together?
Absolutely. When you are peace with your, like if mama ain't happy, ain't nobody happy. That's kind of a rule of marriage, right? It's like when one thing is out of whack, everything's out of whack. If it's your sleep, if it's your personal peace, the amount of stress that you've taken on in your life, I could always tell how short my fuse was with my wife, with my kids, when my stress level was through the roof. And I knew it was time I had to dial something back. Something had to go. And, of course, then you have to make some really tough choices in your life. But when you start dialing in your physical health, and then you sleep well at night, and you make the decisions to cut back on your stress, and you take time to connect with the most important people in your life, and that peace comes to you, everything works better. I can tell you, at my age, 55, almost 55, I think my wife and I both would say we're at a place in our life where we wish that we had known the things we know now, because life is so good for us, right? And I guess that's part of why I write my blog. It's like, don't wait until you're in your 50s or your 40s before you learn this stuff. Man, the sooner you can start putting these things into practice in your life, your physical health, your emotional, spiritual health, you will be so much happier in the way you live your life. You'll be able to enjoy your life in a way that you couldn't otherwise. And that's just really important to what we do around our house.
Well, you can see it in your blog, and you've mentioned this word already, like intentionality. You will take times, maybe it's a midlife crisis. It's not necessarily like January 1st all the time, but you take time out of your busy day to sit down and actually think, what components do you want in your life? Like, what do you want? What's your intention going to be? And I think that's so important. I look back on my career, and it was so much easier for me to push through 60-hour work weeks than it was to sit down and say, wait a second, like, what do I really want? That it's almost like it's so much shorter, but it's almost more difficult to do that. Can you talk about the role of being really intentional in your life and sharing that message?
Yeah, a couple of years ago, it's been quite a few years ago now, probably 5 years ago, I stumbled on a book called Living Forward by Michael Hyatt. And it's basically the idea of putting together a life plan. And, again, back to Stephen Covey, begin with the end in mind. The way Michael would put this is, when you go through and you build that life plan, one of the first things you do is you decide, what are the most important buckets, of my life, the most important accounts that I want to keep in balance. And where do I need to make deposits? And where do I, can I make withdrawals? But a part of that is you have to write a eulogy for all of those different accounts, those different really important groups in your life. You write like, if you're standing around in the crowd at your funeral, what do you want to hear your wife say about you? What do you want your kids to say about you? What do you want your customers to say about you at your funeral? And, you put together for each one of those accounts an envisioned future. Okay, like if I'm seeing myself 5 years down the line or 10 years down the line, I'm going to write as if that is occurring right now. And I've lived my life in such a way that this is what my life looks like in that account. And then you work backwards from there. You go, okay, so what are the steps that I have to do to make that happen? And so I can tell you that at least once a year I get together. I take a week-long retreat, and my wife joins me for half of that. And the first part of that, I go through and I look at my life plan that I put together years ago. I go, okay, are these accounts still the ones that I really think are the most important? And what's changed? What does my envisioned future really look like? Has it changed since the last time I visited this? And okay, what are some of the short-term goals or tasks that I need to take care of now to make sure that my envisioned future 5 years, 10 years down the line looks like that? Whether it's your personal health, my buckets are my own personal health, and that's not just physical, that's emotional, spiritual, all of those. My wife, my kids, my finances, my business, my church community. Those are my big buckets. And so, those are the places where I'll get up in the morning and I open my life plan and I go, okay, this is what I got to do today to make this happen. Or I also have it's a part of that retreat is a spouse survey where I ask my wife once a year, how am I doing, wife? What do I need to change, and how do I need to be a better spouse? I get up on Mondays, and I did this today. I get up on Mondays and I open up my spouse survey. I go, okay, how am I doing here? And what can I do this week to be the husband that I need to be for my wife? And so, I try to be really intentional. I don't always make that, and it sounds pretty nerdy. I get that, but if you don't live on intention, there's a guy named Andy Stanley, and he says, direction, not intention, determines destination. You can have good intentions all day long, but until you turn the wheels toward the direction you want to go, that car is never going to get there. Wow. And so you've got to be intentional about the direction that you're going and all of the places that matter to you most.
And then once you have that set up, that initial work of the intentionality, it sets up this life that you then get to just go and enjoy, right? I mean,
after that, it's a refinement, unless there's a catastrophe or something that happens in your life, but overall, you've got a direction for the different places in your life that you want to go. And, if you are disciplined enough, and you got, Atomic Habits is probably one of the most influential books that I've read in the past several years. And setting up the scaffolding, the framework, the habits, where you do get up in the morning and you look at, what is the direction that I have for the day? At the end of the day, and you review and you go, how did I do? And what am I going to do differently tomorrow? When you set up that scaffolding, then the rest of your life it's not cruise control, but at least you can focus on not, building the house. It's living in the house and enjoying the atmosphere that you've created.
Man, that's very well explained. It reminds me of Matthew McConaughey's book, Green Lights, when he says something along the lines of life, like architecture, is something that once you have a good design, you just need to maintain it. So I think that's amazing.
And I haven't read that book yet. I'm really anxious. It's on my list and I haven't gotten to it yet, but it sounds like it is really well done.
Have to. We can't promote that book enough. And I will argue that you have to do the audiobook. I wouldn't normally tell somebody not to read the book, but to hear it in his own words, it's pretty remarkable. He's a really cool dude
with his southern drawl.
Oh man, he's got great stories. It's really informative. It's moving. It's an awesome book. One of my all-time favorites. Man, I thought this conversation was going to be fantastic, and it exceeded my expectations. This is so much great information and really practical stuff that can really help people. Wondering if you had one simple tip that you would distill down to the listener if they were to walk away from this conversation with just one thing.
Oh, wow, Casey. I think probably if I said anything, it would be to come back to the idea of intentionality, beginning with the end in mind and being intentional about where you want to go. That to me makes all the difference in how your life turns out. You don't want to be on accident. You don't want to wake up one day and be a place you never thought you'd be, and it's not the place you wanted to go. You want to be awake at the wheel, in control as much as you can, and be intentional about your life.
That's wonderful, wonderful advice. I wish you could go back 10, 15 years and give it to me back then.
I know it, myself included. I'm right there with you.
I just, I see people out there, they're maybe, I don't know. You can tell they're not really walking the walk. They're putting out content or something, but you can tell they don't live that life. And then I see somebody like you, in your own sphere of the world, and like whatever scale capacity you have, you're walking the walk, you're living the life. I can tell that you believe in church and in God because it's Christ-like. I can see it. I see it in the pictures. I see it in your content, and it's really remarkable and amazing. And I'm so honored that you would come on to our show and share some of your wisdom. Where would you like people to go to find you and your work?
The two places where I put out content really, it would be davidscotts.blog. And also my Twitter handle is David Scott's blog as well. And, I try to post as often as I can. I'm like everybody else, I'm better at sometimes than others, but I try to put positive content there, useful content there. And again, especially for men, either, young or old, I want to do my very best, like you said, to put that light out there. And, I don't have this big following. I don't have a big platform, but like you said, everybody should use the influence that they have to make the world a better place and to make it the place that they want to be. And so I'm just glad that you've given me an opportunity today to talk about things that I'm passionate about. Thank you so much, Casey.
And you were such a wonderful guest. Thank you. It's been an absolute honor and a privilege. And I love the work that you're doing. And yeah, I mean, if it helps anybody, it's all worth it, dude. It's such a cool thing to see and help you promote. It's really awesome. So thank you so much for everything that you do. And thank you for coming on to our show today. We'll make sure we have everything linked in the show notes.
Thank you, Casey. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. And this has been another episode of Boundless Body Radio.